There was a time in my life when everything seemed to blur together. Days passing without purpose, nights stretching on, filled with questions that never seemed to have answers. I was surrounded by people, laughter, and the noise of everyday life. Yet there was a persistent emptiness inside me. I tried to fill the void with achievements, friendships, even the fleeting joys of entertainment, but nothing seemed to bring lasting peace. It was as if I was searching for something I couldn't name, a longing that only grew with each passing day. My childhood was filled with stories about faith, whispered prayers at bedtime, and an understanding that God existed somewhere out there. But as I grew older, those stories seemed to fade, replaced by the challenges of adolescence and the pressures of adulthood. I became more skeptical, questioning everything I had been taught. I wondered if God was real. Why did life feel so uncertain? Why did pain and suffering exist? These questions haunted me, and I drifted further and further away from the spiritual path I once knew. Then, one day, everything changed. It wasn't a dramatic event or a sudden revelation. It was a quiet moment in the midst of my everyday routine, when I found myself sitting alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed by a sense of restlessness. I remember feeling tired, not just physically, but soul tired. I had reached a point where my own strength, my own plans, and my own understanding could no longer carry me. I realized that I was searching for meaning in all the wrong places. That night, I decided to pray, not out of habit or obligation, but out of genuine desperation. I spoke honestly, admitting my doubts, my fears, and my confusion. I told God that I didn't know if He was real, and if He was, I needed Him to show me. I didn't expect an answer, but as I poured out my heart, something began to shift inside me. There was a gentle sense of peace, a quiet assurance that I wasn't alone. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A warmth that wrapped around me, melting away the coldness that had settled in my heart. Over the next few days, I began to seek out answers. I read the Bible, not just as a book, but as a conversation, asking questions, looking for meaning in the words. I started attending church again, listening to sermons with an open mind. I spoke to friends who were believers, sharing my struggles and doubts with them. What struck me most was the way their faith seemed to anchor them, giving them hope and strength even in the midst of difficulties. There was an authenticity in their lives that I couldn't ignore. One Sunday, I heard a message about the love of Christ, a love that was unconditional, sacrificial, and relentless. The speaker talked about how Jesus had given His life on the cross, not for perfect people, but for those who were broken, lost, and searching. I realized that I didn't need to have it all together to come to God. I didn't need to be perfect or to hide my flaws. Christ had already paid the price for my sins, inviting me into a relationship that was based on grace, not performance. As I reflected on this truth, something inside me broke. I saw my life, the mistakes, the regrets, the times I had turned away from God, and I understood that I was deeply loved, despite it all. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered a simple prayer, surrendering my heart to Christ. I asked Him to forgive me, to guide me, and to fill the emptiness I had carried for so long. There was no thunder, no lightning, just a profound sense of peace and acceptance. From that moment on, my life began to change. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but a gradual journey of growth and renewal. The things that once consumed me, worry, anger, bitterness, began to lose their grip. I found myself drawn to prayer, not just as a ritual, but as a lifeline. I started to see God's hand at work in the details of my life, in answered prayers, in unexpected blessings, in the kindness of others. There were challenges, of course. Surrendering to Christ didn't mean that life suddenly became easy. There were moments of doubt, times when I questioned my faith, and seasons of struggle. But through it all, I discovered a strength that was not my own. Whenever I felt weak or overwhelmed, I remembered the promise that God would never leave me nor forsake me. That assurance gave me courage to face each day, knowing that I was not alone. One of the most profound changes was in my relationships. I began to see people differently, not just as acquaintances, but as individuals created in the image of God. I learned to forgive, to love, and to serve others with a humility I had never known before. The walls I had built around my heart started to crumble, replaced by a desire to connect and share the hope I had found. My journey with Christ also gave me a sense of purpose. Instead of chasing after fleeting goals, I discovered a calling that was rooted in service and compassion. I began volunteering, reaching out to those in need, and sharing my story with others who felt lost or alone. The joy I experienced in giving was unlike anything I had felt before. It was as if the emptiness that had once defined my life was now filled with a light that could not be contained. Looking back, I see how God was at work even when I didn't realize it. He used my struggles, my questions, and my brokenness to draw me closer to Him. The journey was not always easy, but every step brought me closer to the truth that I am loved, redeemed, and called for a purpose. Giving my life to Christ was the most important decision I have ever made. It changed everything, not just my circumstances, but the very foundation of who I am. Today, I walk in the freedom of forgiveness, the assurance of grace, and the hope of eternal life. My story is not just about finding faith, but about discovering a relationship with a God who never gave up on me. If you are searching, if you feel lost or empty, know that Christ's love is available to you. He meets you where you are, offering forgiveness, healing, and a new beginning. My journey is proof that no one is beyond the reach of His grace. Surrendering to Him was the turning point in my life, and I am forever grateful for the peace, joy, and purpose that I have found in Him.